guys, welcome to Dandelion Yoga's virtual studio. Today we're going to talk about headstands because I feel like every person that I have ever spoken to who has practiced yoga has this secret desire to go into a headstand and doesn't know how to get there. So we are going to look at a couple of different things that you need to be practicing at home to prepare your body for a headstand. And we'll look at some poses that will help you along your way. So when we talk about headstand, I'm just going to show you what the pose looks like and show you the steps to get into the pose. And then what I'll do is break down the necessary skills that you need to have in your repertoire before we start practicing headstand. So just to give you a little bit of a baseline so everybody knows kind of where we're going. When you go into a headstand, you start in a tabletop position, and then you drop yourself down, heels and hips come together. The forearms come down to the mat, so our elbows are roughly in line with the shoulders. And you can check that by bringing your fingertips into the crook of your elbow, and that's about where you need to be. Then you bring your hands so that they're together, creating a little pocket. You can interlace the fingers if you want, create a little bit of a basket. Sometimes I do that. And then you press your hands down into the mat. Now your head is going to come into that little basket that you've created, and the forehead, the very, very top of your forehead, kind of where your hairline is, and then 2 inches back. So think 2 finger widths from your hairline, and then another 2 finger widths from your hairline. So anywhere where those 4 fingers are where you are going to want to aim to have your head connect to the mat. So you press your head down into the mat, let your hands catch the rest of your head in that little basket, and then you come up onto your tippy toes. So the hips come up to the sky. Okay, so again, I've measured out my distance, created a little basket, brought my head into my hands, anywhere from my hairline to about 2 inches back, and then I'm walking my hips forward. And then from here, we press down into the mat, squeeze the thighs into the belly, and lift. And then we've got our headstand. And then from here, you can reach up. And then come down. And then you give yourself a moment. And you roll yourself back up. So we have quite a lot of things that are happening in our headstand. Not only is headstand about balance, it's about strength, and it's about flexibility. And I would say that of those 3 things, strength and flexibility are going to be way more important than balance, because balance is a byproduct of strength. Balance is a byproduct of knowing where your body is in space and being able to engage muscles correctly to hold yourself in alignment. And if you have enough strength and flexibility, that will help you to kind of discover where your balance needs to be. Because once you're actually in your headstand, it's very easy to stay in headstand, provided you've got that flexibility and that strength, okay? So, how do we make the body stronger for headstand? I've got 2 different poses that will focus on the core, and I've got a pose that will help you focus on the shoulders, because those are the active muscle groups that you're really getting into with your headstand, the core and the shoulders. So pose number 1, the most boring pose that we go into this pose and people say, So pose number 1, Dandasana, which I know is a super boring answer. I know a lot of people are not really fussed by staff pose, and anytime I go into Dandasana in a class, I always get one person who says, oh, I thought we were just going to sit. But Dandasana is doing some really important things for us. So one, when you come into Dandasana, you make sure that your pelvic bone is connected to the ground. We're not tipping backward. We're not tipping forward and sticking our booty out. We have a nice neutral pelvis, and from there we can lift up through the spine, press the shoulders back, reach the hands down so that the shoulders press away from the ears. And then we flex the toes, engage the quads, so we lift the kneecaps toward the hip creases, and then press our legs down into the mat. So the whole leg is engaged, the torso is engaged. We tuck the tummy slightly, so the belly button presses back, the ribs squeeze together, so everything is nice and tight in the tummy, kind of like somebody's pressed an ice cube into your belly button, and you're trying to get away from that. And we hold here. And this is going to do a couple of things for us. One, it's going to teach you really quickly where a neutral spine position is. And that's going to be hugely beneficial when you're upside down and you don't know your left from your right. Two, we're strengthening some of the muscles that we're going to use to help us lift ourselves into our headstand. So this is a nice, gentle exercise that you can do every single day for, multiple times a day for as long as it feels comfortable for you. And the longer that you're in the pose, the more familiar you're going to become with this slightly warming sensation in the hip creases. And that's your psoas. So your psoas connects from the spine all the way down, kind of into the groin. It's a really, really deep muscle that we don't have a lot of awareness of. And it is usually, without practice, it is a very involuntary muscle. So we have very limited control over it until we learn how to isolate that muscle and to stretch and strengthen it to our advantage. So this is a really nice, gentle exercise that you can do on your body that's going to help you build that awareness of where your psoas is and how strong it is. And that muscle is going to play a huge part in helping you to bring your legs close to your body so that you can find your balance in your headstand. So practice this. The second pose that you need to be practicing is boat pose. And nobody wants to hear this. I think that when I was told that I needed to practice boat pose in order to get into headstand, I was like, no. But you do. And the reason why you do is because lifting your legs up into the air is an act of strength. And strength is different from speed and power. So when you are first learning to come into a headstand, I find that most people are very tempted to throw their weight forward and to try to toss their legs up off the ground and find that imaginary sweet spot in your balance where you can just stop and hold the pose. And that's not how that works, and that's actually quite dangerous, because when you think about where you're placing your weight, your skull is round, or at least somewhat round. You're going to roll. And luckily, if you've got your hands in the correct place, you will more likely than not roll in a way that allows you to tuck your chin and to save your neck. But things happen. So what you want to do is make sure that your lift off is as much strength and as much control as possible, which means that you need to practice things that are helping you build core strength, particularly things that are helping you to squeeze together, because it's that squeezing action that's really going to help you get off the ground to start with. So if you are not a fan of boat, if you've never gotten on with boat, I highly recommend that you start with a little tiny baby version of boat. So you bring your knees into your chest, Brace your hands on the back of your thighs. Inhale, lift up. So we're nice and bright through the chest, like we're pointing our heart toward the top corner of the room. Press the shoulders down, and you can hold here. Or when you're ready for the next step, hinge from the hips so the spine hasn't moved except maybe to tuck the chin slightly. So we're hinging from the hips until we get to about 45 degrees. And you hold here. And then when this becomes achievable for you, you reach your arms out in front of you and just allow it to be that little bit harder. So from here or here, you can start to play with lifting your feet up, one at a time, or maybe both. And you hang out here, okay? And this is really going to be where things start to feel like they're working. You want to make sure that the tummy is active, the chest is lifted, the spine is straight, and we're squeezing everything together and lifting up at the same time. And again, that's really going to help you build that core strength so that you can get into your headstand. Part 2 of your headstand is going to be a combination of strength and flexibility, and that's all going to be in your shoulders. So I want you to think for a moment about the position that you're in. So we're about elbow distance apart with our little basket supporting us, and we're on the ground like this. So all of your weight is going to go through your forearm into the bicep. The shoulder is going to be active, but not only is the shoulder going to be active and weight bearing, you are also going to need to make sure that your spine is in a neutral position. So there's a lot of opening up of the shoulders here. So if you are someone who struggles to bring your hands up overhead and to press your shoulders down and to hold this pose for a length of time, you are probably going to find it very difficult to come into a headstand right away. So there are a couple of things that you can practice. The first thing that you can practice is something that we do all the time in yoga, and that's downward facing dog. So when you come into your downward facing dog, you have all of your attention maybe on the shoulders instead of on the hips. So you press the L's of the hands into the mat, squeeze the elbows together, lift the hips up and back, and then your goal is to bring your biceps and your ears in line. So you're drawing the whole spine, not just bringing the chin to the chest, but drawing the whole spine back to the point where the ears are in line with the biceps. Pressing as hard as you can down into the mat with your hands, and then letting the shoulders squeeze themselves away from the ears. And once you become comfortable holding this position, maybe squeezing your elbows toward midline for good measure, just to make sure that everything is nice and active. Once you become comfortable with that, you can move into a pose that we tend to do a little bit less often in a regular yoga class, which is dolphin pose. So dolphin is a little bit like downward dog on your forearms. You've got your forearms on the mat, toes tucked. We can already see this kind of looks like it's a prep pose for our headstand anyway. We ground down through the elbows, lift the hips up and back, ears in line with the biceps, and we hang out here. And if you want a little bit more, you start to walk the feet toward the rest of the body, and then you ease the hips back until the biceps come back behind the ears again. And what that's going to do is it's going to stretch these muscles here, and it's going to strengthen these muscles. And that's going to give you the support, the stability, and the flexibility that you need when you're coming into your headstand. So one of the things that I like to practice to warm up before I go into headstand is actually coming into my dolphin pose and maybe moving myself forward, kissing the mat, and then coming back. and then forward, and then back. And that just puts a little bit of movement into the shoulders so that I can start to feel the way that those muscles need to engage in order for me to find my balance and to hold my balance in the pose. So once you've done that, once you start to feel comfortable doing that, and you don't have to be a pro, dolphin and moving back and forth, that for me, that's still a challenge. So you don't have to be a pro in order to get into headstand. But you do need to be able to understand how those muscles are moving before you try to get into headstand, and that's for safety purposes as well as preparing the body. So once you're ready to try going into headstand, you have a couple of options. Option one is to try in the center of the room where if you topple over, you're not going to hit anything. And I found that very comforting. I know that a lot of people that I did my certification with practiced against a wall, and I didn't get on with that. But if you would like to practice against a wall, a good rule of thumb is to be about fingertip to elbow away from the wall here. And I'm not going to go into headstand here because I've got the doorknob, but that's about where you need to be, is fingertip to wall, and then come in, and you can make little micro adjustments. You really want to stay closer to the wall than not though, because if you rely on speed to come up and you miss your point of balance and you fall over, that wall is going to be there to catch you, and you need to make sure that you're in a position where you're not putting weight on your neck and tilting backward because you've overshot. So make sure that you are closer to the wall if you're practicing with the wall. I didn't get on with the wall. I preferred to be in the center of the room where I knew that, if I fell over, I could just tuck my chin and roll and hope that a cat wasn't in the way. But wherever you choose to practice, when you're coming down, measure everything out, and do measure, because you really want to make sure that you have a strong base. So you should be in a position where you can touch your elbows with either hands, and then you can fold your fingers together. And this is going to give you a nice little triangle of support. And we know that this is important because when we talk about balance in our feet, we have a similar triangle. We have our 3 arches of our feet, and we've got the 3 arches of our headstand. The difference is that we have an imaginary arch between the elbows. So one, we really want to make sure that we're pressing the elbows down into the mat, because unlike our feet and that arch between the big toe and the heel, we don't actually have anything tangible creating that arch. So for the other 2 arches, we have, our forearms, but we really want to make sure we're pressing the elbows down into the mat to create that imaginary 3rd arch. So once you're there, you bring your head down onto the mat, hairline to 2 inches back, wherever feels most comfortable for you. I've got quite a high hairline, so I tend to just press my hairline into the mat, tuck the toes, and the first thing that you're going to do is just practice pressing the elbows down into the mat and lifting the hips and holding there, and then come down onto the knees again. So you practice that, catching the head, pressing the elbows, and lifting the knees. And gradually, as you continue to practice this, it's going to get a little bit easier to lift and to rock the hips back. So ideally what you want to happen is to have the hips in line with the shoulders, and that's going to give you that point of balance, that idea of that sweet spot where you can stay in one long line, and then your core strength starts to come in. So we're down on our forearms, we're engaging the shoulders, we've got the flexibility in the shoulders. We need the core strength to bring the legs into the body and then to lift the legs up, okay? And there are 2 ways that you can do this. The first way the way that I was taught and the way that I find easiest is that you come up, tuck the leg, and you bring everything in as close as you can. And you come down. So really squeezing the belly and the thigh together. And in this case, we want to make sure that the thigh is doing most of the squeezing, which is where your psoas is going to come in, because your psoas is that muscle that's going to activate and really press the thigh deep, deep into your chest so that you can become a nice tight ball and find your point of balance. I know that some people find it a little bit easier to pike their way up, which is when both feet leave the ground in a straight line at the same time. I'm not so good at that, but we'll give it a go just so that you can have a little visual. So I've measured, just gonna measure again. Created my basket, head to the mat, grounding down, lifting up. And it's not going to happen today. And sometimes that happens, especially if you are trying something new. Or you've been at it for a while and then you walk away from it. You'll find that you've lost a little bit of it. It's been a while since I've tried to pike into a headstand. So it's one of those things that, you're either practicing consistently and you keep it, or, those muscles and that muscle memory kind of goes. So just bear that in mind. Bear in mind as well that your strength and your flexibility varies, particularly if you are female and you've got your cycle that you're going through. You've got different hormones in your body that are interacting at different times, making you more flexible or less flexible, stronger or less strong depending on where you are in your cycle. So bear that in mind when you're going into your headstand. If you know that you become hypermobile at a particular point, maybe don't go into a headstand at that point, and maybe practice some other strengthening techniques, some of the boat pose, or going into dolphin pose, as opposed to trying to throw yourself into a headstand. On the other hand, if you know that you have a couple of days in your cycle where you're very strong, that's a great day to practice your headstand. So know your body as well as knowing your poses. So I'm going to try piking one more time, and we'll see if we get somewhere. There you go. So that is headstand. That is everything that you need to know about the poses that will help you along your way. And I hope that that's helpful. I hope that that gives you a little bit of something to aspire to and to practice. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below or send me an email. As always, please like, please subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.